Hey guys, Lucas Sacco here. Before we get into the video, I did want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor, Dueling Guard. They have mats, deck boxes, bags, everything you can think of for TCG apparel. Check them out in the description box down below and use code SACCO for 5% off. Hey guys, Lucas Sacco here. Today I am bringing you a hand trap tier list. This is like my opinions of what I think the best hand traps in the format are, and just really weighing them against each other. This is for the November 2024 metagame. So this will be for the remote YCS as well as Bologna. Things will change a little bit for the future formats of decks. We're going to have Rizal as well as the Malice deck coming out, and those will be big meta changing decks. So therefore the hand traps that will get played will change. Starting off right into the video, we have Retaliating Sea. This is one that's very specific to this format. I think that as soon as this format ends, we're not going to see this card getting played for a long period of time. This is a card that's really like weird into the meta because some people are playing it, some people are. I don't actually think the card is that good. But it does suppress other decks from being in the format, like Chimera. If you get Retaliating Seed, you just lose the game, right? Branded, you can get Retaliating Seed, lose the game, and then it has like niche interactions that people are playing it for, like into the Azamina decks for Snake Eye and Fire King. I think this card is not really worth playing, but I will put it in tier 3 instead of back in the binder for the time being, just because it does have some interaction against the rogue decks, as well as having like niche interactions against the main decks if it does come up. Ash Blossom is by far tier 1. I think this card has to be in every single main deck. I think if this card is not in your main deck, then you're playing the game wrong. Shout out to Shunping there. But yeah, I really value this card. Not only is it a good defensive card when you're going first against Fuwalos, but it's also like a good card that you can mill, like specifically for Fire King off of Zombie Vampire, you can mill it, and then being able to cycle the card back to your hand is really important. And then the card also is like very powerful, to be honest. It shuts off the Azamina cards directly, so like being able to Ash the Deception and still technically like be +1 in that interaction, especially if they started with Witch, is really good because they burn 2 cards just to get Ash Blossom. Now they really don't have that much advantage left. So I think that Ash Blossom is very, very good into this format. The next thing I wanted to look at is Bestial Monsters. I put Magnemite here, but this is to encompass just all of the Bestial Monsters in general. I think they're okay. I don't think they're as bad as Retaliating Sea, just because they are good into the Azamina cards, right? If you're able to Bestial the Azamina monster in the graveyard, it's going to give you a body for 1. It's going to take away their Azamina card, not just for this turn, or their Azamina engine, not just for this turn, but forever, right? They're not going to be able to get that back in circulation unless they do something weird like a Dispatter or something like that. And then if it is Magnemite, obviously you're going to get more resources and advantage. If it's Druid Swarm, then it's going to be kind of a struggle to deal with, right? So I think these are okay position, not worth main decking, but definitely not the worst deck option. Fuwalos, main deckable. I think that this card is absolutely insane in changing the game. This is what kind of helps with the whole decks playing 20 non-engine, because you can play a deck that doesn't need 20 non-engine anymore, right? If you draw Fuwalos and they don't draw an out, then there's a good chance that you're winning the game going second, which was not the case previously. I felt like in the previous formats, if you drew a hand trap and it was like the 4th hand trap of your deck, it wasn't Ash, Imperm, Valor, or Nib, right? It was the 5th hand trap. You just kind of lost. If it was only hand trap, you drew only non-engine. But Fuwalos definitely changes that, and I like that for the game. I don't like losing the die roll and then just feeling like I lost the match. I feel like Fuwalos definitely evens that out. Next card is DD Crow. I think this card has a lot of like cool play into this format. It's essentially just like a Call by the Grave when you're going second. So you can use this either on like a Princess. You can use this on a Garunix in the graveyard, Narvada. You can use this even to like stop your opponent from being able to revive the IP with Amblowell, which is really neat. Or even just sniping the Amblowell with DD Crow is really, really cool as well. Something I like about this card is that you can't get cross out on it. Because there's a very good chance they're not playing DD Crow. This card's also not once per turn. It's normal summonable. It's level 1. A lot of different factors come into this card being useful, especially like in the Snake Eyes decks when you're trying to make Fuko. So like against Tempai, a lot of the time what will happen is you'll get Shifted, you'll get Paralied, you'll get Fuwalos, and you'll decide that you want to revert back to the Fuko play. So you can do something like Bonfire, add Poplar. And because you have no cards on your field at that point, they can't actually impulse your Poplar. So you'll get to summon the Poplar. Poplar will get its search or whatever. And then you can just normal Crow and make Fuko Bird. And that plays around Impulse to make Fuwalos, which is really, really cool. Next card is DD Crow. I'm sorry, it's after DD Crow is Dimensional Shifter. If you can play this card, you should absolutely do it. This card is up here with Fuwalos, and this is the reason that Tempai is playable as a deck. I think if Shifter got banned, that Tempai would see almost zero play. That this card absolutely carries that deck tremendously. I'm going to go ahead and put it up in tier 1 next to Fuwalos just because we know what it does. This is a gatekeeping card. This keeps decks out of the format like Memento. if Shifter did not exist, Memento would actually just be like the best deck probably. It'd be tier 0, tier 1.5. It plays through the other hand traps phenomenally, except for Shifter. But you do have to give respect where respect is due and just give Shifter the credit it deserves. It's really cringe, and usually the decks that play Shifter are what I would consider bad decks. They're decks that just have less like power to them because I don't utilize their graveyard resources. Like it's cutting off a portion of your deck's power. But it is overall a good card, right? And you have to give the card credit at least. The next thing is Dominus Impulse. I think that this card is almost better than Ash Blossom. When it comes to like the non-floodgate hand traps, because there are different categories, right? Like Purelia and Fuwalos and Shifter, those are like floodgate hand traps. Same with Droll, kind of, to where it applies an effect for the entire turn. And they don't actually stop your opponent from like technically making a board. They don't trade interactively with your opponent. They just kind of put a condition on the turn. I think that Ash and Impulse are by far the best two hand traps that are interactable. With those two, I also want to put Imperm up here right now. These three are absolutely broken. They should be in every single deck right now that's playing hand traps. Unless you're playing board breakers, these cards should be in your deck. And even if you are deciding to play board breakers, right now it's probably better to play a mix of them, right? Because you could play Ash, you could play Imperm, you could play Impulse. And then with that, you could also play the board breakers you're wanting to play, Droplet, Super Poly, Talents, whatever you're wanting to do. But these three cards here, in my opinion, are a staple in every single deck right now. Dominus Purge. No good decks right now are really able to utilize this. Melodious is something that could probably play this, and they should even. But if you're playing Melodious right now, I don't know if that's the best choice, and you should really look at the other options because there are other options in the format. Droll and Lockbird, I think, is probably the fourth best hand trap when it comes to like interactable things. It is kind of a floodgate hand trap. However, the thing with Droll is that it's going to help you help make your other hand traps like way more impactful, right? If you Fuwalos them, they can play through it, right? Like they can just commit to either like full sitting through your board or stopping play, which isn't going to technically like interact with them and try to win like the exchanges of cards to like try to get advantage. Whereas Droll is going to do that. So if you Droll them, they're going to have to continue to play, right? Whereas something like an Imperm may be way more impactful because it turns off their other extenders. So I think that Droll is really, really good in this upcoming format. As well as this card really doesn't conflict as much with something like Impulse. Even though it's a wind monster, most of the time you're going to be using Droll as like the first interaction with your opponent because you do want to get that effect applied as early as possible just to stop them from adding in the future. And then you can always just Impulse after you Droll them. And then even if you think that your opponent only has one line of play, you can always activate the Impulse and just leave the Droll in your hand, right? If you think that Impulse is going to absolutely end their turn, just do that first. Effect Veiler. Effect Veiler is, in my opinion, not that fantastic right now. The best deck is Fire King. We all know that they have several ways to dodge interaction on their guys, whether it's with Kieran, whether it's with Crossout, Called By, even just playing through it with other extenders like Island. Veiler doesn't have the highest potential to end a turn. And that's what I feel like you're really trying to do with this card. Unless you're playing a deck that can play like 20 hand traps like Centurion, I think that you should mainly be focused on trying to like end their board with your like one-off hand trap. That's what Droll also is really good at, is that it can end a turn, right? Like if you draw just Droll, there's a chance that their only starter is Ulcanix, and they go Ulcanix into Aponix and get Drolled and lose the game. So one reason that I'm still leaning towards Droll is that fourth best hand trap. I think that Veiler is worse than DD Crow. Veiler is a hand trap that can only be used on your turn. Droll does have other interactions to where you can use it on both turns. Even when you get Fuwalos, that's something that Shun Ping was working on with his deck, is that he's playing 3 War Arthals, he's playing Droll. What he's doing is he's getting Fuwalos, he's searching Droll if he can, or if he hard drew it, then he's Drolling himself to stop his opponent from drawing. And then he's proceeding to just full combo them. I'm not sure if that's the best interaction or the best thing to build your deck around, but it is an interaction that's really important to know if you're going to be playing cards like this or considering cards like this, because they do provide other utility. Next thing is Phantasme. I think this card is okay. I think it's definitely better than Retaliating Sea. It does provide kind of like a pseudo replacement for Purelia if you don't have Purelia. But if you do have Purelia, I think that the spot just gets taken up by that instead of Phantasme. The Purelia overall is just better. It has better coverage. It doesn't play into Talents or Thrust as bad. Like if you Phantasmate them, they're gonna thrust into talents and like just straight up look at your hand immediately. It also stops you from drawing into other things. So like if you Phantasmate them, it's gonna prohibit you from drawing into things like Imperm, Fuwalos, Parelia, these other like cards that you need no other things on the field to use. It's gonna prohibit those. So that's my grievance with Phantasmate, but I don't think the card is terrible. If you don't have Parelias or Fuwalos, it may be the alternative that you're looking for. For right now, Bell, staying in my binder. I'm not going to take this card out. It just isn't strong enough right now. Mourner, I think that Mourner is tier 2, maybe tier 3. If you're playing a deck like Centurion that does play 20 hand traps, this would be like the next hand trap you play. Just because it trades 1-for-1 very well. And it's really helpful to like try to mitigate the board, like make the board smaller, or just like even stop the board from existing to begin with. So I'd put Mourner probably in tier 3. It's definitely worse than a Bestial. Next up we have Ghost Ogre. I think that Ghost Ogre goes right after Effect Veiler, but right before Bestials. Ogre obviously has its purpose. It is very good into the Azumina cards. If you can use Ogre on Deception, it's going to trade with a lot of value there because they're going to tribute something and they're going to lose that line of play for this turn. Not really a good way to get back to it. It also has really cool interactions versus Fire King. If they don't go for like Island, if they don't go for Sanctuary, they like hard draw Island, you can always Ogre that. Really cool interaction there. This can still be used on IP Little Knight to, or IP Masquerena to destroy it, stop the effect for resolving basically. So really cool interaction there. The only grievance that I have with Ghost Ogre is that it is a light monster, so it does conflict with Impulse. Same reason that Veiler isn't higher up. It just conflicts with literally the best hand trap. One of the best hand traps, right? So that's definitely something to consider. But if you're wanting to play more hand traps, your deck can't play Impulse, Ogre is definitely a card to consider very highly. Parelia. I think this card's great. I don't know if it's main deck worthy, just because if you're main decking Parelia, you're already main decking Fuwalos more than likely. And now that's going to leave a lot of cards that are not as good when you're going first. And to be honest, in this current format, you're going to get like Floodgate hand trapped a lot. And I feel like having hand traps to back up the half board you make is really important for putting a damper on what your opponent's able to do. So I think that Parelia is rated very highly, but I don't know if it's main deck worthy. This seems like a very, very good side deck card for when you know who's going first and second. Last thing here for like the main hand traps, and then I have this duo here together, is Nibiru. This card, phenomenal. People view this as the best card in the game, and I don't think they're wrong. I think this card is super, super good. And in fact, I think it's probably better than Droll. It's better than Crow, Veiler, Ogre, definitely the Bestials. The only issue that I have with Nib right now is that it really does conflict with Impulse, because Nib is a card that you have to use so late into interacting with your opponent. And so you're having to give up many opportunities to use your Impulse just to make your Nib live. And so those conflictions definitely are weird. I think if you're playing a deck that can't play Impulse, once again, you should be maining 3 Nibs. This card is phenomenal, especially into Fire King, into Snake Eye. A lot of these decks are just disrespecting Nib right now because they just assume that you're playing Impulse, or they're disrespecting it because they really just can. You know, it's not as relevant in the format. And so this card is very, very high ceiling, and I think it's definitely worth playing. Lastly, we have Gamma Delta. I really put these cards in here because Landon did win Gaia Key this weekend with these 2 cards in his side deck. I have not talked to him. I don't know how he really felt about these cards. I'm going to put them down here in tier 3. Not a big fan of these. It's kind of the same thing to where it does conflict with Impulse. However, if you draw a Delta or Gamma, you're going to use them really, really early, right? The issue that I have with them is you do have to play a Brick. You have to play Driver. But besides that, they have a lot of high power with them. I just think they don't really combine well with other hand traps. So that's where I'd put them, is down here in tier 3. Besides that, I'm going to leave this template in the description box down below if you guys want to do it for yourself. This is my ratings. If you did have any comments, questions about why I put things in certain spots, leave a comment for that as well, and I'm more than happy to answer all of the comments, as I'm sure you guys see. But besides that, if you guys wouldn't mind commenting, and subscribing, I just hope that you have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.